Hi there. So today's demo is about automated testing. Now, we've all been part of a Blue Prism delivery project where testing takes up a major chunk of time, and we've seen it a lot, right? Where sometimes even like 30 to 40% if they actually regression test everything. And one of the main reasons is today, Blue Prism testing is purely manual, right? One of the things which testers do is that they actually go ahead and check each and every data part which they've tested. Uh, they go to the source, they check the source, they go to the target, they open up the application which is the target, they check the target, and they validate each and every item which has actually been processed by Blue Prism. Now this takes up a considerable amount of time. Now, what happens is that there is something called process test automation, which is actually used in a lot of IT projects, right? What happens in process test automation is that the tester actually writes scripts to, first of all, put in the inputs. And this could be anything. This could be a file. If suppose it requires them to actually go in and put in inputs to a web application, then they might use tools like Selenium or JavaScript of some sorts to actually write those scripts which are required for the inputs. Then the process itself is run, and once the process completes, what they actually do is they also have to write automated scripts to check the outputs, and they validate each and every data item which has been transferred. Now this action of actually writing scripts is done once during the life cycle after development, so that and the same scripts are kind of reused across when the project is actually when the processes are migrated to a higher environment. So it actually saves a considerable amount of time, because compared to manual, because manually you're going to have to validate each and every small item or data part which is there, but scripts are actually used across environments, so it actually saves a lot of time, especially in cases where it's a pretty big project, right? Where upgrades are considered and migrations are considered. So in those cases, right, if you don't have automated scripts, it's the amount of testing required is a big deal. And most probably business also would not like to invest in that kind of an effort if it does not give them that benefit, and if it's purely a stability item or a bug fix or those kind of things. So I've been working on something called something for Blue Prism for automated testing. So now, what the current process which I'm working on consists of, it has a Blue Prism process called Test Suite Master. Now, inputs need to be done as it is traditionally. Inputs, that is the inputs or the data required for the test case, needs to be set up either manually or through a Blue Prism process. But what Blue Test Suite Master does is it can first of all go ahead and kick off any Blue Prism process. It completely depends on the configuration. Okay, it you just have to give it the Blue Prism process name as well as the runtime resource in which the process is required to run. So once the Blue Prism process completes, what it does is that it actually gets the data of the queue. So that's also configurable. So you can specify which queues need to be, the data of which queues need to be extracted, and it will actually extract that and bring it to an Excel. Next, what it also does is that it also gets the session logs of your Blue Prism run from the database, and your session log would contain all sort of information. What we are targeting specifically are the boundary points for a Blue Prism process. Now, your Blue Prism process probably has some inputs, which is probably going to get it from some system or some application. It also would have some outputs where it's going to get it from some system, some application, right? So we are actually targeting specifically the session logs of those points, which are boundary conditions for Blue Prism. And what we are going to be doing, or what the Test Suite Master process actually does, it actually extracts all the data from those boundary conditions, and you can actually specify which is the stage which constitute as inputs, which is the stage which constitutes as outputs, and then you can write logic to validate data. And I'm going to show you pretty much how. Now, another feature which is provided is that it actually creates a release for which shows the test coverage. So you might have a huge process, right? And what happens is testers would also like to test all the branches of that process or any forks or anything which are there, any decision points. So it actually shows you all the paths which your test has actually taken and marks them as green. If suppose it actually does not, if your test has not covered that particular branch, then it will not mark it as green. So all there's another feature, and this is also pretty much configurable. And at this point, let me just show you what I have plans for, and how it actually works. So first of all, coming to the actual process. So this is my process, which is going to be tested. So it's a pretty simple process. It actually takes things up from a queue. So it actually loads the queue first from an Excel. And once the queue is loaded, it actually goes ahead and submits it into a web page. And it's a pretty simple web page. This is the web page in which it's going to submit. Now, there is also an object for this one. And let me show you this. So object also, there's just a submit button where it actually writes it into the web page and then just clicks on the submit button. So for our test today, writer one is taken as output. So this particular object called submit registration with action submit and stage writer one, I've considered one of the boundary conditions. So I've configured that, and I'm going to pretty much show you right now how I've configured that also. At the same time, I have taken get next item as one of the other boundary conditions where I need to make sure that all the items have been processed. So this is my process and object. And let me just close these. And I'm going to show you the Excel where you actually configure this. So just give me a minute. So first is the process and runtime resource mapping, the master configuration. So I have the Blue Prism process name, the runtime resource host port, whether it's an SSO or not, the credential which is used to run, the database connection. So now this is Jenkins right now because my database connection is called Jenkins, but then in a real environment, it's pretty much going to be dev or UAT or production, right? The startup parameters in case required to run this process. And this is the test results file, which has more details which we need to log for this particular process. And I'm going to show you this next. Also, whether this process needs to be imported or not, the release file details and all those things. And I'm going to show you this also. So let me close this and open the test results file. So this is my submit registration test results file. So my master sheet is always there. So I have specifically mentioned the queues here which need to be picked up, the worksheet, and this is just a blank worksheet at this time, the worksheet which needs to be worked for this particular queue. Next, which I also here is the session data which needs to be extracted. Remember I said that, I'm also extracting data from the specific boundary points where there's an input coming in or there's an output going out. And for me, the get next item is the input. So I'm going to show you that. So this is the get next item page, right? I just have to mention, suppose if I need to extract the data for any particular stage, I just have to mention the stage name, process name, page name, object name, and action name. And your database actually has all this in this particular order. Similarly for output, so I have specifically mentioned writer. And again, I'm just looking at the object right now, the object. So the process name and page name is null in this case. Object name is submit registration and action is submit. Stage name is, as I said, is writer. So just for writing formally is better, I've also mentioned, okay, this is my input, which I'm actually sending it in, and my file actually just has these records. This is my expected output. So, obviously I haven't done many transformations as such. I'm just doing a direct write to a particular page. So this is my expected output with the queue status also for each one of them. Just for this demo, so I have a validation sheet here, okay? Just for this particular demo, this validation sheet, I've marked in all the item. I mean, the validations. I marked formulas for them. At the same time, so that for our test case, if I go to expected output, my last record is supposed to be an exception. So I specifically marked it to show how a test case can fail. And, once this runs, you'll know how this works. So let me just start running this so that I can show you how this works. So I'm kind of utilizing two runtime resources in the same system. So that's why it is like this. So let's just give it a little time to run. And this is my page, and this is the actual run which is happening. So while this runs, so bear in mind a couple of things, right? This actually picks up data from the session log. So the expectation is not to run this in a higher environment, but probably in the lower testing environments. And you can just leave it to run at night, and then the next day you'll have all the test cases work through and figured out which ones have been working, which ones have a problem, and the developers can probably start working on the test cases which have failed, right? So one is this. Second is there are also some exceptions. It actually looks at, so the output. Let's say today I'm taking it from the writer stage. For HTML and cases or Windows applications, those are fine. But for service automation, what happens is that you typically use global send keys, right? Global send keys only works if you actually click on that particular field, not if you haven't clicked on it, right? But still the writer part or the global send keys part would be successful. So the expectation is that the process would take care of cases like those, and your queue item status would let me know how this works. So would probably give the correct status. So I'm seeing that this is completed. Let me go and check the test results. So I'm just opening up the Excel again. So again, master is there, input is there, expected output is there, and registration queue status. So this is the queue item data. I can see that the item key is there, the status is showing completed. Now, obviously, if there are any exceptions, it will also show exception records in there. Next is get item data. So if you see, I have one item here, two item, second item here, third item here. So this is actually get next item data, the actual collection which is coming back in get next item. So I can see that that is also present. So provided it comes in as input and output, it will actually show me in this page. Same thing with writer output. This is writer one, which I configured earlier, and it actually shows me, okay, Ashish, and then the next record, and then the last record. This is also present. So it actually shows me all the records have come through, and I'm just going to click on my validation sheet. So this is my validation sheet, which I've actually put in. So remember I said that just for this test, what I've done is that I marked the queue status of the third record as exception. But if I actually go to this page, I can see that the third record is also completed. So in a way, it didn't actually match the expected output. So in my validation sheet, it actually failed this test case. So the rest of the cases where I'm matching name as well as phone number, address, all of that is actually a pass in here. So this is actually validating the test cases, specifically the test case data as well as the status of my automation, whether it worked fine or not. Next, what I'm going to check is my test coverage. So previously, when I actually did show you this, most of it was in like black color font. So if you see, this is now green. The parts which have been successful are in green. So let me just magnify this a little. So it actually tested all these parts in green successfully. So if you see, my error handling is still in black. So error handling has not been tested in this case. Same thing with the queue part. The queue has been tested. I mean, the queue load has been tested from the Excel, but my error handling for this has not been tested. And let me go to the object. So if I check the object, so this is my submit action. As you can see, all this is tested. It's actually marked in green. Just the error handling part, exception handling part has not been tested. So this was test coverage, which was also configurable. So that's about it for automated test automation for Blue Prism. Thank you for joining.